On today's episode of the Talkin TV podcast, we discuss the newest HBO addition to the superhero genre, executive produced and created by the ever-controversial Joss Whedon. We are here to talk about the new period piece superhero edition, The Nevers. I am Dom, the movie nerd.
I am Chris, the TV nerd. I hope you guys never have to watch a series debut this messy again for the rest of your lives, but we're here to break it down for you today anyways. So, we took the hit.
It's going to be a wild ride indeed, and we hope you guys enjoy this episode of the Talkin TV show as much as we do giving it to you guys. What's up, buddy?
Not much, man. It's a little earlier than usual, dude. Good morning.
Yeah, well, it's funny because it's not really because we kind of did this last week, but again, just like I feel like I don't know, it feels like it's been both super long since we last got together, but also it feels like there's been like no time at all just because of like how busy I've been this past week.
I agree with that. Yeah, man. Life's funny like that, you know?
Yeah,
it's
it really is.
You miss one day because you throw up a few clips and the whole world feels different when really it's
does.
we're back doing the show again.
Yes,
which is great,
actually,
man.
We had the giant monkey fighting the giant lizard. We took a little bit of a break for Easter, and we covered like the saddest and most depressing animated movie ever made. And now we're back. I feel like we're back to like a little bit of our usual fare as far as that goes. You know, we've got a new superhero show to talk about, and I love that you brought up the idea of a messy debut because when I read you off some of the names that are involved in this show, you're gonna laugh as far as their involvement because it quite literally, I feel like this show that we're about to talk about is the definition of all the guys from the Marvel Netflix show that got fired from Netflix the minute that like Marvel took back all the rights to the shows and basically started putting them on Disney Plus, and Warner's literally just stepped in and was like, okay, we'll take you guys, we'll partner you guys with the guys who is no longer associated with Marvel in order to basically create like our version of a superhero show, and this is the result in a weird way. Like, I'll say this, I didn't hate this show at all. I actually kind of dug the pilot, but again, it is simply a pilot overall. So people, without further ado, we're going to start breaking down the debut episode of The Nevers, which aired officially for the first time last night, April 11th, on HBO Max overall. It's a new show. It's a period piece / superhero story, which is something that we really haven't gotten before. But before we actually jump into it, Chris, I wanted to know, like, kind of what your thoughts were, like, kind of going into the show.
Yeah, going into the show, I was excited for it. I do enjoy this period. I enjoy the steampunk aesthetic. I've sort of gravitated towards that in my own personal creativity in regards to like artworks for past musical projects, sort of echoing some of that steampunk feel and that like sort of Victorian but technology that's ahead of the time sort of vibe. I've always been influenced by that, I guess, like gravitating towards that as a consumer of media and the video games I've played. Like there's a great series called Dishonored, and it's just a steampunk sort of like murder mystery story, and it's very popular game, and a lot of people like the setting. So I was intrigued, you know, I'm of this generation. I think steampunk's pretty interesting. And so I was kind of looking forward to a refreshing take on something that we are all but inundated with this day and age. And so, yeah, my spirits were high going into this one. What about you?
Yeah, the interesting thing is that steampunk has never necessarily been something that I've gravitated towards per se. It's kind of always been that thing where I'm like, why do we feel the need to do this? You know, like I'm all about period pieces. I love period pieces when they're done right because it always just gives the costume and production design department a chance to go absolutely apeshit with the visuals. And when they're done right, they're done really, really right. But the steampunk thing, I don't know. I've never really kind of gravitated towards it, mostly because I've never really seen anything where it works per se, but I thought this kind of looked cool, you know. Again, Joss Whedon, pre-controversy and everything, you know, I still like his work overall. I thought it was cool that he was returning to TV overall, and the show definitely looked poppy and flashy enough to really catch my attention. So I'm like, okay, cool. I'm definitely gonna want to check this out overall. And now after we watched the pilot, I can definitely say that I wasn't disappointed, but at the same time, I also wasn't like elated per se. But the question is that necessarily Whedon's fault, or is that more so the fault of the overall kind of let's say, gluttony and inundation of content that we have. Because before we get actually into the stuff that we're going to talk about, I did want to bring up that I truly believe that not just with superhero content, but with content in general, we're really, really getting to the point where just to be able to watch anything is just starting to feel like a chore, just because of how much overall content there is. But without further ado, let's get into the spoiler-free review section of it. So this is the part where we'll just give our basic overall breakdown of the show. So the show starts off with, kind of this interesting thing where it shows all of these different people in Victorian-era England. They look up and they see something in the sky that we're not entirely sure of. And next thing you know, it cuts to a couple years later, and it shows that there is this orphanage, again, let me know if this sounds familiar, that basically runs this kind of this haven for all of a sudden these superpowered individuals. And they basically do this thing where it's like, oh, you've got, they do that X-Men thing where it's like, oh, the few of them that can like blend in with the rest of human beings because their powers are more psychologically based. And then you have the one where they have the physical abnormalities, And of course, you've got the basic breakdown of, oh, there's the people who think that they're a danger to society, and there's the people who want to experiment on them. It's hitting all the beats as far as kind of this type of superhero affair goes, And it's interesting because I've kind of been in this weird spot with kind of some of the alternative superhero content that we've seen where we're kind of past, I feel like, the super deconstructive stuff like The Boys and Watchmen. And now we're kind of just getting into the, okay, what are the different types of superhero stories that we can tell while still kind of maintaining the superhero fun stuff that people love, as far as the action and the punching and the rebelling against society and all that. And it's weird because this came out very, very close to another show that I'm watching, which is Amazon's animated show Invincible. And I think that show is handling it right as far as being this cool, interesting balance between like kind of, the classical superhero struggle that we're kind of used to, that we enjoy, versus incorporating some of like the new modern storytelling sensibilities in there, as far as that being, an adult animated cartoon. But this show kind of does a little bit of the opposite of that, where it's much more so of a genre piece than a superhero piece, I would say. It leans into that definitely, and I actually think that's one of the show's strengths overall, but at the same time, it does also fall into a little bit of that cliche territory, if that makes any sense. Let me know. Am I making any sense here as far as this goes?
Yeah, you are, except there's one major thing that I disagree with the community who I've seen covering and writing articles about this. This isn't a superhero story. Just because there are people with abilities does not make it a superhero story. Look at sci-fi's The Magicians. Same exact setup. They're all these kids who live in the underbelly of New York City, and there's this sort of deeper layer with magic, and they all find each other because that's just how these stories have to happen. Get them all in the same place. They meet the big bad, and then they go off on their adventure, and then they end with the cliffhanger. We get season 2, right? But that's not a superhero story. That's just 3 seasons into The Magicians, and that's how they've done it every time. I think there's a sickness, honestly. I think people are superhero sick. I was thinking about this morning as I was gathering my thoughts on this, and we just want so much of superheroes that I think marketing had no choice but to sort of, with what's happened to Joss and with the fact that, hey, this show was in production before what came to light, and so we've already sunk a boatload of money into this. There's a lot of CG. There's a lot of elegant outfits and set designs and sort of like set dressings, that old Victorian furniture, which is very expensive, and they have so much of it in this show. They had to recreate, first of all, recreating period pieces alone is a very expensive endeavor. So I just think to best salvage this project, because a lot of people obviously are turned off to it just by the big name attached to it, I think they had to throw superhero on it, because what else are people watching these days as a majority whole? I mean, it's superhero this, superhero that. And I think that's really the only reason. They're gifted, sure. They're touched, sure. But I mean, the Magicians were touched in the sci-fi show The Magicians. They're not calling them superheroes.
True.
Look at The Witcher, right? Those witches, right? They're not superheroes in the Witcher land. They're touched. They have some similar abilities to some of the people we've seen here. I don't know. What's your take on that?
No, you're right. Honestly, the problem with that is, again, it's the fact of I literally just watched this for the first time last night, and I literally just woke up and got into
I wasn't saying you.
No.
Yeah.
I'm blaming that as far as the marketing playing its tricks on my brain. As far as I see something like this, which again I automatically assume, okay, period piece X-Men, and then I see Joss Whedon's name on it, and that's just my fault for kind of
your
falling
X-Men
for the marketing. Right.
Your X-Men comparison is very on point. I mean, let's be honest.
And that's always been the interest, but that's always been the interesting thing, is that we kind of have this, disposition in our head that the X-Men are superheroes, when in reality, the X-Men really aren't superheroes in the same way that the Avengers are. So I guess that's kind of just where my brain went as far as that goes, because you're right. It's very much not a superhero show as far as that goes. It's much more so a kind of like, it's like a piece on like kind of like, like societal perception and like different level of social class and different perception as far as based on external abnormalities. It's a racism allegory is what it is, overall. And I think that, how do I put this? I think that definitely the show has a lot of promise as far as where it could go still with the storytelling, but I don't necessarily, again, I don't want to make this statement yet because it is still just the first episode, but already off the bat, I can see that we're already in for some very familiar storytelling techniques going forward. So with that being said, unless you kind of had anything else that you wanted to add to it, I feel like we definitely should start to get into the points of the show overall. But people,
Yeah. The only thing I wanted to say was, first of all, to Mithrandir in the chat, thanks for hanging out, man. Appreciate that, as always.
That's a great name, by the way.
Right?
That's a great name.
And yeah, he knows his stuff for sure. And so, guys, do you agree with us? Are people superheroes sick? Is this just an allegory? Let us know in the comments. Subscribe. Check this video out. Hit the subscribe button and the like button, the notification bell. We have a bunch of other Nevers content coming out this week. And yeah, with that being said, Dom, do you want to jump into the next topic here?
Please do. So, is this a good debut episode overall? Chris, you were the one that brought this idea up because we've been talking a lot recently in kind of our gluttony of Disney recaps about just debut episodes and how a pilot has to kind of hook you and how the idea of that has kind of changed as far as the whole pilot season. So you brought this point up. So kind of walk me through your thoughts on this. Do you think this is a good, taking aside like kind of all like kind of the marketing shifts that they had to put into this in order to kind of like remarket this and salvage this thing after the whole Joss controversy came out. Do you think this is a good debut episode?
So the one thing I actually credit this episode to for the first time in a long time is not sort of showing signs of what we've been talking about here on the channel of being the pilot season. I mean, this episode immediately gets you into the mystery. It gets you into the world. It's not just like giving you a taste where, okay, maybe we'll have something tangible by the end of this season to go off of for season 2. Like, no, we have a lot thrown at us. But whereas that's a strength, it's also, in my opinion, its biggest weakness. I think that this debut is very messy. You meet a whole bunch of characters and there's a whole bunch of names thrown at you, and they don't really do the best job of establishing, outside of the main two, right? Those two women who are the sisters that you meet right away. I forget their names right now. They don't do a good job of establishing who they are, and
Amelia True and Penance Adair.
Right. Thank you. And so they don't do a good job of really establishing the stakes of this world, right? Like, what is going to happen if the Parliament succeed in sort of, silencing the voices of the touched? Like, what are the real ramifications? Who is the real foe aside from someone who just slams through an opera house performance at the end of this episode? Like, what are we really up against? It seems like only the people who were touched and a select few remember when that giant ship flew over at the end there. So it seems like there's some sort of mystery there. Like, well, why did they have that moment where people were fainting, kneeling, sort of in awe and feeling their humanity to the fullest extent? And then 3 seconds later, they forget about it, go on their day, and everyone acts like nothing happened. Like, where is the sort of glue to bind that very intriguing hook throughout the course of this episode? Because to me,
what you're telling me is that it's a typical HBO pilot, is what you're saying. Because that's literally every single HBO pilot in the history of like the company.
But I think it's different in this one because of the scope of what they're trying to tackle, and knowing that there is 6 episodes, it seems like we have to cover a lot of ground now to get some sort of footing that keeps us gives us some stability going through this. Like, as I am, so I'll toss it off to you after I say this, just to clarify my stance so people aren't too confused. I am as intrigued as I am confused right now, which isn't a bad thing. But
my question is it 6 or is it 12? Because I was reading in different spots, and some articles said that it was 12. So did they cut the episode count in half, or did I miss that?
Okay, I saw an article from Screen Rant saying 12.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe they're wrong, maybe they're right. I don't know.
Yeah, because on Wikipedia, it only says 6 episodes right now, but we know the Wikipedia sometimes doesn't put up all the episodes that'll be airing at once, and it adds more as time goes on. So that I just wanted to make sure of that first and foremost. But as far as your points, I agree with you 100% because it was definitely one of those. I've watched a lot of HBO pilots recently, so I completely understand where you're coming from as far as that goes. Where you're right, they kind of throw you right into the world. They're throwing all this shit at you. They're kind of like going from one action sequence to another. It's certainly entertaining, and I certainly like the sense of like, okay, we're getting a taste of this world and a taste of all of these different characters and a taste of the stakes to come without actually getting like something that's like kind of telling you everything, which in my opinion is what a good pilot is supposed to do. But you're absolutely right. It's definitely something where it feels like it's going from one thing to another so fast that I don't necessarily have time to process it and be like, okay, what the hell is going on before we just jump to the next thing. And next thing you know, they're at an opera house, and next thing you know, you have people coming up to the floor, and they're just murdering people. I'm like, who the hell is this chick who is supposed to be like the evil bad guy? And it turns out that they set her up from the beginning because she was one of the ones that was touched by the giant ship. And I'm like, all of this crap is happening at once. It's hella cool, and I like it because the other thing that I like too is it doesn't, to me, fall, even though Whedon writes this episode, it doesn't fall victim to kind of like, and I'll get into this in a little bit once we talk more about Whedon himself, but it doesn't fall victim to me of kind of like the snappy Whedon dialogue, per se, that I feel like a lot of people have criticized Marvel movies for because his kind of imprint is so strong that it kind of affected the rest of Marvel's films in general. But the thing is that I've never hated Whedon's dialogue. Again, it's a reason why Buffy the Vampire lasted 7 seasons and why Firefly was such a cult hit the way that it is. Like, he knows how to write good dialogue, and he knows how to write good, fleshed out characters, Say what you will about him as a person, but at the very least, he is talented when it comes to, like, setting this up. And again, if this entire monstrosity is just his brainchild, like, kudos is all I gotta say, because this is already a very, very fleshed out world with a lot of intrigue and mystery that I'm actually really, really invested in and I want to explore.
Yeah, the last thing I'll sort of add to that point is I do disagree with you, obviously, in the snappy dialogue. I think he's good at it. I just think it really diminishes and takes away from almost every moment I've seen him do it in. In this situation, the one instance comes when they're sort of speaking pre-performance in the opera house, and the characters are sort of starting to converge for the first time, and you have the parliamentary guy, and you have sort of the dude who's like the guy looking at crows, and so they're all starting to come together, and before they break apart and collide, and it kind of devalued the moment a bit for me, but I can see why people like it. Clearly, the Marvel films are very successful, but what I will say is the world is very interesting. I just think it was poorly executed, but I think there is a solid foundation there. So I'm going to stick with it. Obviously, I'm going to give it a fair go. Like, I'm not bashing this show to like smithereens by any means right now, but I am saying that, like, I hope that it finds its voice, because right now it feels a little messy. So right. Yeah, with that being said, I mean, what do you guys think? Was this a good debut episode? Are you looking forward to Joss Whedon period piece show on HBO? Let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear what you guys think, and of course, be sure to subscribe and leave a like on this video. But Dom, did you have another topic for us?
I did.
I hope so.
Well, I mean, we kind of referenced it a little bit now. So I find it interesting that after sitting through 8 weeks of WandaVision, 9 episodes of them constantly hinting at, or is this what's going to bring in the X-Men? Is this what's going to bring in the X-Men? Is this what's going to bring the X-Men? And then, like I said, all we got was a bad boner joke at the end of it in order to kind of pay that off. I'm never going to stop riffing on Marvel for that, because that might be, of all the kind of like, what's called the bait and switches, the bad bait and switches, I'll say, that they've done, that still might be the worst. But I do find it interesting how HBO essentially does an X-Men pilot as a period piece is their whole thing, right? So in order to kind of transition this into our next point, which is the Nevers just an X-Men period piece, I do find that there is a lot of legitimacy to that argument, because it's weird, because I feel like after Fox, I'll say it too, screwed up the X-Men franchise so badly, and and all those Marvel fanboys are kind of patiently waiting for the MCU to introduce the mutants in the way that they will, I find it interesting that HBO kind of just pulls this out. And in a way, like, this is doing everything that the X-Men franchise was known for, right? It's having the good social comparison. It's having the good social commentary. It's having the kind of, it's showing the cool integration of them within the kind of the society at the time. And they're adding the extra edge of it being a period piece, which already makes it more fascinating, because that already introduces, let's say, a less tolerant time period for this, which already ups the stakes for the main characters, So as far as that goes, I feel like this, to me, is doing everything that the X-Men movies were doing right, because I feel like even though this is entirely what the X-Men is about, right? So to me, the reason why the X-Men were always the most fascinating. I'll say personally, my favorite of the Marvel character, of the Marvel kind of canon of characters, is the fact that they weren't superheroes. They were kind of fighting for they kind of were fighting for, equal civil rights, and they were, in a sense, kind of the allegory for a lot of the social commentary at the time. I know a lot of X-Men comic book writers made a lot of interesting AIDS commentary within X-Men comics during the 90s as far as that goes. So I guess my question is, do you think that this is kind of doing everything that the X-Men did that made them so cool, and do you think this has the potential to do that, in a sense, potentially before Marvel does, when they introduce the mutants? Because we all know how deep Marvel goes with their stuff.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Very deep. No, I certainly see the similarities. I think anyone would, if they're sort of keeping their eye peeled to this genre that has just consumed Hollywood and filmmaking of, let's say, the better half of the last decade and a half, right? So yeah, clearly there's comparisons, and of course it has that typical setup where someone's taking in these orphans and trying to show them a way to use their powers, which I guess we don't really know too much yet, but I'm assuming that these sisters are on the side of good, and so obviously they're trying to sort of cultivate these young people and guide them, I think is the best word, guide them towards doing the right thing with their gifts and being able to cope with them. So it's very Professor Xavier, and of course, Joss is no stranger to the superhero realm, specifically Marvel, so it does feel, I guess, a little second nature. But the thing is, I feel like it also has value in regards to it just being a good sort of like sci-fi fantasy setup. Like we've seen this before with other shows, like I said, with like the Magicians, and it's like, it doesn't just have to be attributed to the superhero genre. Sure, this is very similar because these people get their powers, whereas like with the Magicians, they're born with it and they cultivate it, and it comes out at a certain point in their life, kind of like with Harry Potter, but like it's always been there, But so yeah, sure, someone gave them the power. X-Men similarities are abundant, but I do think this has the ability to separate itself by being rooted in a period piece. I feel the writing was already way more sophisticated than anything we've gotten from Marvel, sort of dealing with Parliament and that side of government, and dealing with the different social statuses of how some of these characters, I guess, are like urchins or orphans, and they're on the street, they're poor. It's like got classism in there. It's like tackling bigger issues than I've seen tackled in Marvel, at least not until recently. Clearly, Marvel's trying to make up for lost time in that field, I'd say, with like Falcon and Winter Soldier. But like this out of the gates, I think, is already begging larger questions. So I think, yes, there are X-Men comparisons, but I do think that actually kind of puts it in a box and sells it short. Because while I said it was messy, I'm intrigued. I really am.
No, I am too, especially given the fact that in addition to X-Men, they're also pulling from a myriad of other superhero properties, especially recently, because in a way, this in its debut episode kind of has explained what Umbrella Academy still hasn't been able to do within 2 seasons, which is it actually shows you, even if it doesn't actually directly tell you, it shows you at the very least where the Nevers got their powers from, with the emergence of that giant ship in the end. Like, we don't know what that is. And the other cool thing about this is, and I did some research on this too, this is not based off of a pre-existing property in any way, shape, or form. This is a completely original property. So for me, the intrigue of it comes in for the fact that for once we get a superhero like even The Boys, even as awesome as that is, The Boys is still based in comic book lore in some sense. They can play around with and twist some of the lore, but in the sense that the original source material is still there. This is a new original thing. There is no source material to pull from. There are certainly going to be allusions to other superhero properties, and we're probably going to see that as we go throughout the show. But for once, we actually get a superhero property where I have no idea what's going to happen next. And I'm actually amazed because we haven't gotten a property that's been able to do that in, God, I don't even remember. It was before Game of Thrones was a thing, that's for sure.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it seems like there's a web that's going to go deeper and that's going to make you think a little more than just a lot of these surface level properties, at least with how surface level Marvel seems to be, with how simply Thanos was defeated and just all that, how easy that arc was to just sort of write, if you look at it as a whole, like it took how many movies to get there? Like, I don't know. I just never saw the value in there. Whereas in this, I see some interesting questions being asked. I see something that keeps me on the line, that makes me want to go back to episode 2, even though it wasn't the most polished debut.
Because this is also the thing that I want to give Joss Whedon credit for as well, just for like him as a superhero storyteller, just as a storyteller in general. I feel like the reason why we personally gravitate towards his Avengers movies more so than some of the later entries is the fact of, even at their most bombastic and superhero related, those movies were trying to say something, you know? As surface level as it was, that first Avengers movie still was, I think, trying to make a statement about whether we still needed superheroes or whether there was even a need for superheroes in general. And Age of Ultron, messy as that movie was still trying to make a statement on, you know, again, I personally think, you know, poorly so, but again, like, just with how rushed that movie was trying to make a statement on kind of the influence of the internet and technology on these superhero statements. You know, those movies were, to me, still trying to say something, which, again, seems to be the total opposite of what Marvel is seeking to do with the majority of their superhero properties. You know, like you said, they're trying to make up for lost time now with their TV series, but that's why I've always been willing to give Whedon more credit than, say, like, the other superhero, you know, than, like, the rest of the people working in this field overall. And it's especially why I'm willing to continue to give this show a go, because even already with, like, just that myriad, just the ending montage of showing all the different people that seemingly were gifted by the ship, you know, they were not all the typical, like, parliamentary people. It was all weirdos and freaks and outsiders kind of that were in that stance kind of before they got superpowers, you know? So it was already kind of looking at the outsiders of society, right? And that's kind of like and that's kind of like why I'm really looking forward to this, because I have a feeling that this show can still pull something out and say something really cool about that, you know?
I agree, because that ending little sequence there, or scene rather, was very interesting, because, like, we don't know anything about this ship. Was it aliens? Was it some, you know, factions doing? It has a chance to, while have that similar X-Men feel, that similar, I'd say, sort of sci-fi fantasy ensemble setup feel, it has a chance to veer off in a direction that's different and refreshing, and I really hope it takes that route, man, because it'd be so refreshing to see something that, even though I don't think it is superhero, I've seen the labeling, I've seen the articles, I know everyone, their superhero sickness isn't going to not see it that way, so, like, if people are going to see it that way, I at least hope that they take the route, which is so clearly there and so available to them, of offering something new to a very saturated genre.
Right.
But with that being said, man, let's get into our next topic. Before we do that, let us know, like, do you think this is just an X-Men period piece? I mean, does it feel like we're building to something worthwhile, or does it feel like we're building to something that we've seen before, except now we're just in Victorian England? Let us know in the comments, subscribe, give this video a like, and with that being said, Dom, do you have another topic for us today?
Yeah, actually, it helped, because our previous topic, I feel like, kind of does build into our next topic, because even though, again, I don't necessarily think of when I think of superheroes, the X-Men necessarily aren't the first one that I think of. Again, this is the latest installment, again, be it, well, you know, how the marketing is on this, even though by nature this show is more of a sci-fi show, it is still, unfortunately, has been branded by the marketing, a superhero show. So the next question and topic that I have is, what does this add to the superhero genre? And by default, also, does the vision of this show translate in its debut overall? I think with that second point, I absolutely think it does, because already this show to me is 1,009 more visually interesting than the last, like, 5 kind of, Marvel superhero properties that we've seen overall, not discounting everything. Again, it's weird, because this is kind of coming off of, again, Zack Snyder's Justice League and The Boys Season 2 and Watchmen and a whole bunch of other really distinct, really visually interesting, kind of really, what's the word I'm looking for? Really, I feel like auteur-driven kind of like superhero things that actually do have things to say and aren't just the typical Marvel surface level thing. So as far as what this adds overall to the superhero genre, that I think it still might be too soon to say overall, just because of so far, just based off what we've gotten in this pilot episode, we really only have kind of allusions to other superhero properties. But again, I think that's where kind of the majesty of the show comes in, because again, even though there are allusions to other superhero properties, this is still an original superhero property. So this has a chance to actually go in new and unique superhero storytelling directions that others may have been kind of withheld from doing because of their dictation on the source material, Because that's so fascinating, right? As far as adaptations go, in the sense of where there was a time when an adaptation was supposed to be something kind of distinctly different from the thing that we got. The fact of what makes Jaws the movie so interesting is the fact that it is so distinctly different from Jaws the book overall. But now, and I feel like Harry Potter had a lot to do with this, we're in this sense of where if something is not devoutly like an almost shot-for-shot recreation of the original thing that it's based on, it's almost like people just like won't accept it for what it is, So I think that's kind of like an interesting stance. I mean, you're a guy who's read a lot of comics, a lot more comics than I have, so you could probably speak better to that than I can, Especially since Marvel's kind of taken that stance and kind of almost put their own stance on it. But like, what do you think about that?
No, I think I pretty much agree with everything you just said. I think it was very well said too. The Artur angle is a very interesting one to bring into the discussion. I really agree with that. Yeah, so I guess I'll sort of tackle it in the sense that what do I think it adds to the superhero genre? Sitting here fresh after watching the debut episode, I think the biggest thing it adds is hope for someone like me who's very, no pun intended, disenfranchised with superhero movies as a whole. I'm sick of the inundation. I think there is a huge superhero sickness that's going around right now where if it's not superheroes and if it's not a major franchise that's been pre-established like Fast and Furious or James Bond or Mission Impossible, it doesn't have legs to stand on, which is very unfortunate. Like, where's the room for new titles to grow and come about? And so I think this gives me hope because it could be a way to sort of not only introduce something new to the superhero genre, but challenge the pre-existing fields if this show does see success. Sorry, the pre-existing titles in the field to up their game, to truly give us something different. You say we're going to get something different in Phase 4 Marvel. Clearly, it's too early to tell to speak on that. But hey, if this show's successful, you may have to go back to the drawing board because I hope that this show, if anything, shows that people are waking up to the formula, are getting tired of the formula. And if we're going to keep getting inundated with superhero content, I at least hope that it begs the question of how can we do something that hasn't been done before? Because that's what I want. There's thousands of comics, thousands of source material, and it just seems like they're not using any of it because the comics I read are so much more interesting than the movies and TV shows that I watch for the most part. Clearly, there's exceptions. The Boys, that Watchmen series of 2019, but that's a needle in the haystack.
Right.
That's every once in a while.
Right.
That's like the two that came to the top of my head. I should be able to name with how many superhero properties we have. At least 5 more, but I can't right now. I cannot do that in the heat of the moment. So does the vision of this show translate, right? That was your second point.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily know if it did. It felt a bit messy. It felt a bit cloudy. It's trying to do a lot, and it's going to take more than a pilot episode. This kind of goes to our argument of binge or watch it week to week, where I think maybe if we had all the pieces and I was able to sit down and binge all 6 or 12 episodes, whatever it is, I probably wouldn't even bring this point up. But because of the way they chose to release it, I feel confused right now, but I also feel intrigued.
Right.
So I'm going to let you take that and bounce off all that. But that's just kind of like my initial response to the questions we posed.
Well, it's fascinating because we've talked a lot about kind of how the idea of altruism is just going away with the mass corporatization of everything, right? And it's kind of, in a weird way, we've kind of found ourselves in the same situation that we were in, like we saw in one of our favorite movies from last year, Mank, with the 30s and 40s, where everything is so kind of driven by the studios that there really isn't a chance for kind of this singular altruistic vision to shine through, right? And it's why we praise something like Zack Snyder's Justice League, because even maybe though that movie wasn't nearly a perfect movie, it was just such a thing that we just never get anymore, that we're willing to kind of give it. We're kind of willing to kind of cast aside some of our problems that we may have had with it, as far, in order to kind of reward the things that we rarely get anymore. And this, in a weird way, I kind of think also falls into that trick, because again, even as problematic of a creator and an author as Joss is, Joss still is one of those guys that has a singular, unique vision, and that is something that, again, it's so tricky because we'll get into this more with kind of the differentiation between the art and the artist, but it's something that we get so rarely nowadays. So rarely do we get something now that is truly the vision of just one person. And again, we praise all these directors that Marvel hires, when really, how many of them actually have a chance to make their vision shine through overall? The answer is barely any of them. I can think of maybe 3 overall. It's James Gunn, Taika Waititi, and there. See, I can't even name a third one overall as far as the different as far as different people whose kind of singular unique visions can shine through overall. And it's both disheartening, but at the same time it's also tricky, because again, people seem to like the stuff that they get, and they like the studio dribble because they just want to be entertained overall, and as much as we like, we constantly we say that we hope that people are waking up overall, the sad truth is that, again, we are constantly the minority overall, and the majority of people do not care. They just want to get the thing that they are being entertained by, and right now it is just the latest superhero thing. So I guess the question that kind of defines whether the show is going to have legs overall is, will this show get the viewers that it can get? Because as far as factoring in also what you were talking about with kind of the week-to-week thing, right? That's the HBO of it all, right? HBO has kind of made their mark in kind of the singular, unique space. Like, they kind of were always a step above television, which is why they were kind of able to, I feel like, again, the botch release of HBO Max aside, kind of able to blend into the kind of the new age of streaming so seamlessly, and why kind of Game of Thrones kind of almost lent itself to the kind of the early days of that streaming as far as, the kind of being the epicenter of monoculture. Whether this show is the show that will be able to reclaim that spot, absolutely not. I don't think it will be because, again, just for sheer fact of Disney and Marvel's kind of moved from film to TV now, but as far as kind of providing good alternative counter programming, which is something that I think that HBO has always done an incredible job of overall, back when they were kind of the epicenter of pop culture, with kind of the Sopranos heyday pre when Lost took over and was the talk of the town, on cable TV, when cable TV almost had a chance to reclaim its spot before AMC and Breaking Bad came out and then Game of Thrones came out and it was like, yeah, they're basically done with, So like, kind of, what's your take on all that?
Yeah, I think I can answer the monoculture question pretty easily. I've seen some articles try and write that and say, hey, this could be HBO's new. Why does it have to be, though?
Right,
why does
right.
it?
Exactly.
Because that already, in turn, it's like one of my major issues with that I've learned sort of being a critic is with the marketing. My second major issue is with the entertainment journalism that surrounds it. Why are you putting that? It's almost like you're setting it up for failure. Like they have to know that
exactly
when
they're doing.
They have to know that it's self-sabotaging a completely new IP that has no previously existing source material that is just debuting, trying to add that pressure of, hey, live up to a Titan, just because you're on the same network, just because you're on the same sort of streaming service that this monster show that, like we always say, dominated a monoculture. I mean, hey, Talkin' Thrones debuting very soon. Stay tuned in our channel. Absolutely. But like, why does it have to be? That's another issue that I have here. Like, why does it have to be superheroes, right? Superhero sickness. Why does it have to live up to something that it's similar to or in the same ballpark of? That's not art. Like, as much as I enjoy ranking and critiquing film in that regard, sort of pitting a film against another film, there's a lot to learn there. I do think that we've also forgot the other side of it where it's art and it's subjective. So while someone can rank a list, just because you like that critic or that commentator does not mean you have to live and die by their words. Don't let them brainwash you towards a review. Have that sort of, even though you can't speak to them, sit with that for the rest of the day. If you truly love movies, you want to sit with that person's ranking and be like, I can see why he would say that. Maybe I'll change that on my list. But the movie he put at number one, that was completely wrong. And I just don't know if those kind of conversations happen. So it's just like, I get it, maybe this is sort of an attack by the industry to sort of discredit Joss. And you spoke about separating the art from the artist. Like, clearly, I know both of us don't condone, if it's true, what he did behind the scenes. I haven't followed the case at all because honestly, I'm just so sick of this stuff getting into my entertainment. But if it's true, obviously we don't condone it. But like, hey, we're not talking about what he did personally right now. We're talking about the show. Right. So it's just...
And as of right now, again, like, they haven't taken his name off the credits. They obviously couldn't because that would have just screwed up so many things. Obviously he has been replaced as chief showrunner on the show. His name is still attached to the show. So, like, we kind of can't talk about the show without talking about him, Yeah.
And I would say HBO is a respectable organization who, for the most part, does the right thing by, like, the culture and the social zeitgeist. So, I mean, at this point, clearly they haven't, not aired the show or anything. So it's just... I just think the conversation is so wrong about this. And it's interesting too. This is something I'm learning in school about like marketing and journalism. Dude, the way that these writers are writing about all this stuff, it could just be like a tactic for like Marvel, since this has been marketed as a superhero series to remain on top, to kill any competition, which by all means is really smart by them.
Theories now, or
no, it's not. It's just like knowledge of journalism, right? Like it's sort of like these big companies give the screeners out. So the journalists, if they want to keep getting the screeners and get those clicks first, because it's a click per view marketing system, you do not get dollar signs in today's age if you don't get those clicks. And the article that gets the first clicks gets the most clicks. So they want to, not bash the movies too much when they get those screeners, and they don't want to say the wrong things because they won't get the screener the next time. And then slowly but surely they fall by the wayside. Just look at what happened with Collider. Yep. They started voicing their own opinions and they stopped being a part of the monoculture of film criticism on YouTube. And where are they now? So this isn't conspiratorial at all. It's just business and money talking.
You're right. This is absolutely business and money talking. And honestly, it wouldn't surprise me. And I'm really, really hoping this doesn't happen. I mean, obviously, we'll see what happens at the end of this first season, but I have a bad feeling they're already shaping this up for a cancellation after one season. It would not surprise me one bit. It would not, after everything that you just said about how, like, the industry, it would not surprise me one bit if that ends up happening, you know? Especially given because, so remember how before I named off all of those names, what's it called, that were involved? So these are the other names that are involved in the production behind the scenes, besides Joss Whedon. Philippa Goslett, who is taking over as the showrunner, besides Joss. Doug Petrie, who was one of the two showrunners involved with Daredevil Season 2 and The Defenders. Jane Espensen, who was a co-producer on Game of Thrones, who actually wrote one of my favorite episodes of Season 1. Ilene S. Landress, who was actually a producer, a longtime HBO producer going all the way back to The Sopranos. And Bernadette Caulfield, who is an X-Files producer and also a Game of Thrones producer overall. So, needless to say, I think it's safe to say that this is a slate of producers who know what they're doing as far as content goes, you know?
Totally. No, it's an experienced ensemble right there of producers, man, for sure. I don't know. I guess not to get too far away from like the initial topic. I'm not saying I'm 100% right. I'm just a guy on YouTube giving his criticism who happens to study marketing and journalism as well. And to me, it would make sense, but like I might not be right. And so obviously that's just another angle that I don't see people talking about that I definitely analyze and sort of studying this type of stuff. Like I've been in the industry though, on the music business side of things, and I've been told by labels like, hey, you might want to write this type of song because your competitor on the other label's writing this type of song. So it's just, I just want people to think about the other side of things, because it's just insane to me how the biggest genre in the world right now for entertainment, superheroes, has really only been dominated by one company, with the second one having little moments here and there. It's very crazy to me.
No, it's very interesting because, again, for all the talk that people have of like, oh, which casting is more appropriate online, no, this is the real stuff that determines what type of properties they're going to get and what comic books they're going to get. And it depresses me that like not many people are like using the tool that they have at their resource in order to find this out. You know, why is it that every time we get something that should lead to more information, it leads to just spread of disinformation and less? So whatever.
Yeah.
Like I just that's kind of all that I want to kind of talk about as far as that goes. But I definitely think that it will add something, but it definitely seems like the marketing is going to be something. It's definitely going to be an uphill battle for the show, to say the least, overall, since it already seems to have started off like with 1 foot like shot. So I don't know if that metaphor is an accurate comparison, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, too. I was going to ask the audience, I mean, what do you guys think? Will the Nevers add something new to the superhero genre? Do you think it has a chance, I guess, with how this topic has sort of shifted and changed throughout the course of the conversation? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'd be curious to hear what you guys think. Of course, subscribe to this channel, hit that like button, turn on that bell for notifications, and Dom, let's move into our final topic, man.
Yeah,
this has been a good chat.
Yeah, let's talk about Whedon. Let's talk about the man himself. We've been dropping his name throughout this podcast a couple different times. And I mean, safe to say that the man has certainly gotten a problematic record overall. A lot of people have come out and spoken against it, both for his actions on both Buffy the Vampire Slayer and obviously Ray Fisher has waged a never-ending seeming war against him for everything that he was involved with in Justice League, or in this case now as has been aptly titled, Justice League. And it really is that interesting kind of conundrum that we have to ask ourselves, kind of just as viewers and lovers of this kind of entertainment, every single time this happens, you know, and it seems to have been happening a lot more frequently recently, you know, as far as kind of the whole, my thoughts on kind of like the PC culture overall and what it's done to the industry, what it's doing to culture, you know, my thoughts on that are what they are, as far as I think that while it is a good idea in concept, I think it's largely going to do way more damage than actually like helping anything overall, and I don't think I'm alone in that sentiment overall. But that being said, it is a really tricky situation in the sense of where, even though the case against Josh definitely seems sound as far as the amount of people that have come out against him, the problem is we still don't have any definitive anything against him. Right now, everything is all just allegations overall, and there's nothing definitive or concrete, which is why this is such a tricky situation, and why I think that HBO didn't just bother to just scrap this thing completely overall, you know, because given just it's clear from the opening shot that this is Josh's baby overall, and like that this is his from the get-go overall, despite all the different people that were involved with it, right? So I'm not trying to you know, discredit anything that's been raised against him, but it is a tricky situation that we constantly find ourselves in when the people that make the shit that we love the most always turn out to be some of the most problematic human beings overall, you know?
Yeah, Dom, do you know where I just came from? before we did
Where?
this podcast?
Well, I know you were in a class. I know where you're getting at as far as that goes, but I don't know the name of the actual class itself. So you'll have to refresh.
That's
my
where I was
memory as
getting
far
at.
as
I
that
just
goes.
came from an
Yeah.
ethics in journalism class, and my professor is a very, I'd say, open-minded person. I think she's very fair with her assessments. We spoke a lot about the Kobe case and all that. And so the one thing I will say is I've looked up a few articles, and guys, if I'm wrong in the chat, like I said, I've said this a lot over the past few weeks, go back and look up the videos. I am sick of these conversations stepping on the feet of all the creative people who make these shows happen. I think it's a very big detriment to the actors who are giving great performances, to the crew who's making this show happen, to the set design in this beautifully
Right.
tapestried show. And so I'm just sick, and I didn't want to look into this at all because, look, it had nothing to do with if I was going to watch this show or not. It's the court of law handles that. So where I'm going with this is right now it only seems to be alleged. Of course, if he did it, we do not agree with that here.
No.
That's not right.
Nor do we condone it, obviously.
Of course, never work with him again, and I wouldn't cover anything that he did if he did it. But as of now, it's just allegedly. So I think we all just need to sit back, stop pointing fingers, and let our system do its job. Because if we devalue the system, it's not going to do its job. So due process will...
And we need to stop doing court and determination by Twitter. We need to stop with that. That overall, forget if it's Kevin Spacey or something as harmless as what happened with Aziz Ansari. We need to stop with this whole court appeal by Twitter thing. Because that is just damaging on so many different levels.
And my professor was just talking about this theory, and she's worked for the New York Times. She's done a few different things like that as an opinion writer and stuff. And she was just talking about, like, it almost, at this point in time, doesn't matter what your court case says. If you get killed in the court of public opinion on Twitter, good luck recovering your career. Like, Aziz got so lucky. I don't know how he did that.
Well,
he was also
it's funny
early on.
Bring that up because have you seen Aziz in anything aside from the one stand-up special that he did since then, even though he still did technically get lucky in that sense?
I guess you're right. I mean, he did have that show on Netflix, but I guess it did. Master of None did get canceled.
Aired long before it, and he's supposedly working on season 3 right now, but aired long
that's what I heard.
before
That's
the allegations against him came out.
You're right, though. It is tough, and it's a tricky situation, but it's like, this is not why I got into being a critic. And with Falcon and the Winter Soldier over the past few weeks, this conversation keeps coming up, and I'm sick of not being able to talk about the plot line of a show because I disagree with something. It makes me an ist of that or an ist of this. That's me critiquing art. I'm not talking about like what it's doing. Obviously, I think all those things are great. I'm trying to talk vaguely right now because I know this isn't too much of what our show's about, but if we're talking about Joss, it seemed kind of impossible not to go to this point. So the whole thing is exactly like what you said, man. Twitter isn't a place of court. It isn't a place of law. It's a place of opinion. We need to start realizing that that's what it is. Someone could say something, but it's not about what they say, right? It's about what they do. And so there's a court case against Joss. He's going to have to answer for all that type of stuff. And hey, look, like we've said, if something happens and it comes out that he did something wrong, like, yeah, we're not going to support that. It's just not who we are as people. But we also don't want to, quickly just drive a stake into someone because someone made a tweet that went viral. And I think it's the biggest thing to me, which kills me as an artist, right? I've been trying to be a creative professional since I was fucking 12 when I first started playing guitar. It's all I wanted to do. Like, it's just like there's thousands of names. Did you guys watch the credits? I listened to the score. It was pretty nice. So I saw the credits. I was enjoying the music. It's actually really good music in this show. And there's a lot more names than just Joss. And I think it's so discrediting, disheartening, unfortunate for those people who are obviously all achieving their dream, working in the film industry. And we're not talking about their achievement here right now. We're talking about what someone may have done. That's the part that kills me the most, man.
No, I agree with you 100% because you're right. Because again, as much as it sucks that, again, it always seems to be only one or two people that usually ever get credited with this type of stuff. Previously it was the stars, and now in recent time it's been the creators of the show. But it completely discredits the thousands of other people. Every single film production has no less than at least, to that caliber, has no less than 1,000 people working on it, all in different capacity. And the problem is every single time one of these things happen, it discredits everyone else that works on the property, which sucks overall, regardless of the actions of said creator, it doesn't affect the millions of other people that worked on set, that helped to bring this vision of this art that we love to life overall. And that to me is what's even more destructive, is the fact that every time one of those productions gets shut down because of the actions of one of these individuals, that's however many millions of people that are not to that level of the social strata, that are working class people like us that have to work and live paycheck to paycheck that do not get to work. And that's what's the most disheartening about this entire thing overall. Like with House of Cards, when they had that delay because of the whole Spacey thing, right? They eventually worked through it, right? And they managed to put out that final season, which was what it was. But that was, God, how many people was that were out of work for that long, you know? It was a lot. It was a lot of people overall, you know? And Netflix has bounced back, and Netflix has definitely been the best, I feel like, when it comes to handling these sorts of scenarios overall. You know, say what you will about their company policies when it comes to certain of their individual properties, but at the very least, I'd say that they've done the best job as far as how to handle this type of scenario and move forward in the sense of allowing for these people to continue to work and moving past kind of the said, what's it called? Kind of the heinous actions of certain of these creatives or stars involved, you know? And while the nevers, I still think it's too soon to say, obviously, again, because it was just bad timing as far as when the Josh stuff dropped, like right as this was getting wrapped and right as this was getting ready to debut overall. So there was kind of nothing else that they could do other than replace him as the main lead. So with them, it was kind of just a timing scenario, but like kind of these are the things that we have to look forward to now as far as kind of the art and entertainment world, you know? And these are the discussions that are going to keep happening if this type of mentality is continued to be applied towards the art that we love.
Yeah, the witch hunt mentality.
Yeah, which is what it is. We call it that.
And again, like we said, like Kevin Spacey, monster, terrible person. I never want to see him in anything again. We agree on that. Joss Whedon, if he turns out to be true, then yeah, I feel the same way about him as I do about Kevin Spacey, if it turns out to be true, but it hasn't yet. So we can't even answer, in my opinion, the question of this topic. You know, does this show embody the best of Whedon? Because it's not going to be given the legs to even garner that type of conversation. I think it might. It's too early to tell, just from like a critical standpoint, not sort of talking about the social side. Again, I thought it was messy but intriguing, but like, because of this witch hunt mentality, like we don't even have the chance to give someone the chance to defend themselves, which last I checked, he's an American citizen. And last I checked, he has the right to a lawyer, and the court of law is where it's going to, dude, he's going to go away for a long time if like this stuff's true. Like
if this stuff is true,
and rightfully so.
Great that he is a rich Hollywood celebrity and getting into the whole like semantics of like kind of pop, you know, part of culture. Hopefully, again, like he doesn't get like the treatment that like almost it seems like every rich person does in jail. I'll refer you guys to Jordan Belfort, but kind of as far as that goes, like, yeah, if this goes through, like, obviously it's safe to say it will not be taken lightly overall.
And my last point is, like, let's just use the Bill Cosby thing for so long. Hannibal Buress was having that joke for years before it happened. Like, these people hear the rumblings. Family Guy had the Kevin Spacey joke in like the early 2000s. They just choose to ignore it because it's convenient for them at that point in time. Right. So the Hollywood hypocrisy is too busy making dollar signs off this people. And so they don't want to raise awareness to it because, you know, Harvey Weinstein's making them a boatload of money.
Convenient for them.
Yeah, until it's convenient for them before they get labeled the bad guys. In the 11th hour, they'll come through. So honestly, they need to answer just as many questions as the people on trial, man, because it's just a messed up system. And that's the part that sucks, because the little people, the set designers, the prop makers, those are the people that honestly,
artists,
those are the people that I love. And that's the reason why I'm a critic and I love watching film and dissecting movies and TV. It's not because of the corporate suits who are just as hypocritical and as just any politician, honestly. Like, and it sucks that they have to be a part of this discussion because they just want to work, man. In an industry, we have to work to live. Yeah. You can't not pay the bills.
It's true.
That's all I got to say on that.
Nah, you're right. You're 100% right overall. And it sucks. It's a disgusting situation overall. But again, I refer you to the line from Game of Thrones in order to wrap this up, but I feel like it could be applied to any situation in this sense, that it works so well because it happens. If we're talking about an HBO show, again, Jorah Mormont, rest in peace, that guy forever. Why is it the little people always suffer when the High Lords play their Game of Thrones? Like, there you go. Boom. I feel like
drop.
That perfectly discusses it overall. So, guys, thank you once again for tuning into our episode overall. Chris, also, before I did that thing again where I completely skipped to the final thoughts before we actually did it, what are your final thoughts and star rating on the debut episode of The Nevers?
Yeah, I'm going to go with a 3 out of 5, generously a 3 out of 5. I wanted to do a 2 out of 5, but, you know, you kind of changed my mind a bit and sort of elaborated on some of the setup that maybe I just wasn't seeing because, you know, the marketing and all that got to me. So I'm going to go with a 3 out of 5. I'm intrigued. I hope it gets cleaner, though. It's a little dirty right now. I got to, you know, put some Windex on the window. I can't really see where I'm going, but I want to. So I'm going to work on that window and clean that window. That's my very terrible analogy to end it. But yeah.
Say, your metaphors never cease to make me laugh.
What about you, man?
Overall. But yeah, as far as pilots go, as far as HBO show, I think that, again, HBO, like everything else in kind of this streaming war and this glutton of content, their quality overall has definitely dropped, especially since their Max content has not nearly lived up to kind of the hype and quality that their original HBO content has. But overall, I still think this was an intriguing pilot overall, taking aside, the allegations towards the creator overall. I still think this was a very entertaining pilot. I'm especially intrigued to see where it goes. I feel like it's given me something that precious few other properties in general have given me something, which is something that feels original in the sense overall. And it definitely seems like something that I'm very interested in seeing where it goes, even if the initial product wasn't necessarily what I thought it was. So I will give this, I'll go 3.5 out of 5 overall for this debut pilot overall. So with that being said, people, that was our podcast discussing The Nevers debut overall. What did you guys think? Did you guys get a chance to watch The Nevers? If you didn't, I would definitely recommend going and watching it overall if you just want something kind of new and cool and different to watch overall, some kind of more a good counter programming overall to kind of the Marvel-ism of the day overall. Let us know your guys' thoughts in the comment section below. Be sure to also click the like button and the subscribe button and the little bell next to the subscribe button. That way you guys get notified every time we put up new content. We've got so much new content that we've got coming for you down the line. This Wednesday, actually, we've got an interview with another Kim's Convenience cast member. I don't know how we keep doing this, but we somehow do it. Chris, who are we interviewing on Wednesday?
We're going to be speaking with the actor who portrays Enrique.
I know is the character, which
Enrique is one of my favorite big characters.
Interviewing Enrique, which I love that because he's hilarious.
He's hilarious, man. His name is Rodrigo Fernandez Stoll. He's a Second City actor, so he has some, improv skill sets too. We're gonna be able to talk to him about a lot, guys. It's gonna be. He seems like the nicest dude ever. So yeah, Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard. See you there.
That's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait for that. Just I've loved each and every single one of these Kim's interviews that we've had. We're first with Jad, then with Sugith, and now with Rodrigo. And we got a couple more coming down the line. We've got obviously our penultimate Falcon and Winter Soldier episode that we'll be covering this coming Friday night, and then the following week, unfortunately, we will have to bid adieu to another one of Chris's favorite shows that was Acts Unceremoniously. We will be doing our wrap-up goodbye episode for Kim's Convenience for our podcast episode. After that, we've also got our Oscars draft coming up. We've got Mortal Kombat coming up. We've got so much coming down the line. May, you guys thought that April was crazy as far as the amount of content that we're going to just wait May and getting into the summer months where things are just getting revved up, if you know what I mean, as far as the first time watch that we're doing.
That's awesome.
You thought I wasn't going to be able to crack a car pun. We're just getting started as far as that goes. It's going to be a good one. And of course, you guys can keep track of everything that we're doing by following us on the social medias profiles, following us at Talkin TV or at Talkin TV Podcast on Facebook and Instagram overall. Chris, where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
Yeah, man. Thank you. They could follow me at Christian Ivanko. Ivanko spelled EVANKO. I'm on anywhere that matters, aka Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube even. I have a bunch of music coming down the pipeline. I also have another podcast called Talkin with Andrew and Chris, a show about life, music, and everything in between. That's Talkin, spelled the same way we spell it here on our show. And just hit the link in my bio on any of those platforms to hear me sing or to hear me talk about music and other types of stuff. Yeah. So thanks, Dom. And what about yourself, man? Where can they find you?
I think the most recent thing that I posted was I actually posted about this show this morning after I finished watching it on my Facebook, of course, and Instagram at Movie Nerd Reviews, where I posted, has anyone watched this yet? Started out a bit generic, but it's got potential overall. I think that's just going to be like a thing that I start doing, just like reading my most recent sarcastic Facebook post that I make overall. But
I dig it.
Movie Nerd Reviews on Facebook and Instagram overall. I might be doing something productive on there. I have no idea. Again, they're my personal pages that I post on. I'm almost up to 1,000 followers on Instagram, so cool.
Damn.
Kudos, I guess. Like
solid,
I
actually.
I don't know how many of those are spam accounts, but I'm like, cool. I guess. And I only started my Instagram account for the first time 3 years ago, so winning at life, I guess. I have no idea. I don't know what the current currency is on social media as far as followers go. So, but you guys can follow me there. Overall, let us know again what your thoughts were on the Nevers. We'll see you guys on Wednesday for our interview with Rodrigo, and of course, 12 scenes in a short film, and watch more fucking movies. We'll see you guys next time.